Many of the techniques with strategic relationships have more power than you can imagine. They can be used to modify and shape the environment immediately around you, or they can destroy entire nations. In today's episode, I'll share with you how to destroy a country from within, and I'm going to give you high-level concepts, but just to demonstrate that the relationships between the smallest unit, which is the individual, and the biggest unit, the country, really do matter. And there's interconnected webs of influence, loyalty, and desire that would motivate the overall endeavor to make a country worse. I'm not talking about any particular country. I'm going to talk about the three key steps that an external country can do to destroy another country. And of course, again, I'm not talking about any specific situation that's going on right now. These are just the concepts to show you how very small units in a larger ecosystem can have a lot of influence. So I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. So to corrupt a nation, to destroy it, to bring it to its knees, and to wear it out, there are three key elements. I'll go over the three key elements, and then I'll expand them as we proceed through the program itself. Number one is the citizen must not believe the country is worth defending. If they hate or mistrust the country, it will fall easily. Number two, the acceleration of the enemy's vices. So an external country would help another country accelerate their vices. This compromises political leaders. It floods the country with drugs. It makes the poison easy and lethal. So think about fentanyl, for example. There's enough fentanyl being in just one transport that could kill 31 million people. So the opioid crisis, people have a demand for the drug. The drug is lethal. Number three, economic destruction by basically easy money. So you want to hold the government responsible for foreign aid, domestic support, kickbacks of political figures. You want to compromise the advisors and researchers, so essentially the country spends itself into debt. So those are the three concepts. Now, where do these concepts come from, and how do they impact the individual? So the individual is the citizen. The individual, if they love their country, if they stand with their country, if they accept the weaknesses of their country and strive towards a better future, then if an enemy shows up, whether they show up invisibly like what we're talking about here, or they physically show up as far as an invading military, that individual citizen's more likely to form organizations and work towards the mutual defense. If you believe your neighbor is of good quality, a good person, and you see their house being robbed, you may say something, you may even do something. But if you believe your neighbor is a downright scoundrel and their yard isn't right and you just don't like them in general, then you might not want to take the risk. Because really, relationships are about risk and reward. You may not want to take the risk to call out somebody robbing your neighbor's house. Can you see how this works? So that citizen, how that citizen in general feels about their country is influenced by media. It's influenced by where the leadership tends to focus. It's influenced by individual situations. So if a large population is poor, they very often will pull down those with resources, not really knowing why they're doing that, or taking the time and effort to figure out how they can produce their own resources. But that's that kind of chaos from point number one. Number two is accelerating the enemy's vices. Well, if the country has a drug problem, and you can load up that country with drugs, cheap drugs, you can keep everybody in a dumb stupor. And you can also, with the overdoses and the other burdens on the economic system because people are not working, or the burdens on the social system because people are in healthcare or they are otherwise in treatment, you again are wasting resources of a country. Now, this actually is part of the Cloward-Piven strategy, where you're going to raise an issue. So if you can accelerate the vices of a country, then internal in the country, you have people raise the issue, such as the drug problem. And then it's very vague. And then we're going to solve the drug problem with a militarization of police force. So that war against drugs. And then ultimately, the government ends up spending 20 to 40% of its budget on things that could be reduced by eliminating demand. So there's that, again, there's that relationship. If the individual citizen has a demand for drugs, has a demand for vices, then they will very often find that enough distraction that they don't really care what's going on in the bigger picture. And so if you can accelerate that, you gain control of the country by weakening the country. These three elements, too, also are useful internally. So I'm generally talking about one country in putting pressure or influencing another country, weakening it so that it would not resist an invasion. But this can also be where one political group tickles the vices so that when the other group says you shouldn't be doing that, it's bad for you, the other group looks like they're oppressing. But the Clyde Perkins strategy is where an advocate says, hey, look, we've got a drug problem and the government's not doing enough. And then by demanding and gaining promises, then finally holding the government to the promises, it actually can overwhelm the system. So the government grows in size, consumes more resources, eventually collapses. That's just what happens. You don't need to own a politician to influence them. Again, the point 3 that I made, that economic destruction can come by compromising the advisors and researchers. And so you don't necessarily own the politician, but you might own the professors that they go turn to for answers. You may own the resources in the research elements. You may own unelected officials that are actually in that shadow government of administrative systems. So again, there's no conspiracy here. It's just an example how the smallest unit, if compromised, and compromised at volume, dissolves the protection or the support in the larger system. So you don't need to, if you're getting into a marketplace, you don't need to go against your biggest competitor. You could do analysis on the competitor. You could map out what products and services they have. You could identify sub-segments of their customer base, and then you can identify the gaps between what is it they provide and what is it that segment desires, and then you go in with a premium service to that sub-segment and basically take all the profits out of their business. Now, again, when we do strategic consulting, we talk about these things, and they are proxy to each other and analogous to each other, meaning the getting one consumer to change product is the methods you use to get that one consumer to change product can be tested on a list of consumers. And then once you've got a system in place to convert those individuals, you can slowly take away market share. Now, I know a lot of folks want to do this fast. None of what I'm describing here today is fast. It's all meant to be systematic. It's all meant to be thematic into the programs and decision-making methods people make, and ultimately to weaken the system so that you can then come in as a hero. So a political party might do this. They might come in as a hero after they notice some part of this is breaking down. And that allows them to seek power or control. But they also might neglect an area in order for it to fail more so that they can come back in and raise it back up. Now, even if you know, so if you're in political power, you're in the government, and you know that there's some other country trying to destroy your country from without, you might even allow that to happen because that gives you the grand enemy. So let's move into practical advice. Real quick, a quote, make the enemy live up to your own book of standards of rules. Make the enemy live up to your own book of rules. This is from Sal Alinsky. I'm not sure if it's from his book for Rules for Radicals, but in the marketplace, if your competitor says, this is the practical use, if your competitor says, we do X, so example, Walmart and Target have kind of a no questions asked product return. Target has a no questions asked. If you tell them the price is something, they're going to use that price at checkout. It's a way of reinforcing proper price marking on all the products, and then also helping the customer move along with a pleasant experience. At Walmart, you can take any product in with a receipt, and they'll refund your money, no questions asked. It doesn't even matter the condition of the product. They will do that. Now, very small people take advantage of that program, but if you flood that program with, hey, if you're not happy with your product, you should take it back to Walmart. If you buy a product someplace else, you can take it back to Walmart. If you buy a product at a flea market, take it to Walmart and you can get cash. So selling like an opportunity program. There's so many ways you can make that program not work well for them, even though it is a good program. It's kind of taking care of the customer. I had overheard somebody say that you go into Target, get an expensive product, and then when they ring it up, because that person can't argue with you about the price, if they ring it up for $150, you say, oh no, that was marked $75 and that was on sale. And now the person has saved $75. And this is a conversation I overheard when I was traveling, just people in the background. Again, you can put pressure on the competition this way, but I can tell you there are better ways to absorb market share, which is finding the smallest unit, which is the most profitable customer your competitor has, and then going after them specifically, delivering additional value. So a lot of ways that this destroy from without methodology is used actually reduces value, and I don't think that that's a good thing. I don't think you want to break something down to build it back better. I think it's a waste of resources. If you were to do the math and the cash flow on it, why would you run a company in the ground just so you can turn around and build it back up? Unless you've got a large amount of investors in the wing, unless you've got a big product launch, or you're floating or kiting stock, dropping out, lowering a company's value isn't as valuable as steadily increasing value by finding small niche opportunities. So you can, using point number one, is you can go find who are the profitable customers that your competitor has, who are ideally suited for the service that you have at a premium price, and then doing target marketing to go in on your competitors. Accelerating your enemy's vice. Now, this is what happens all the time. You see it in the news. I really don't want to get into the specifics of the news stories, but I don't think it's going to benefit you in the long run to compromise your competitor. Send hookers over to their office when they're working late, and then they get in trouble, and those hookers had cameras. That's a Hunter Biden thing. That's not useful in the business place, and it actually can be considered blackmail or illegal. However, if your competitor, for example, there's these two electrical contractors, and one electrical contractor knew the other contractor always wanted to one up the extras. So if my client had a new truck and it was a Ford F-150, the other guy'd go out immediately and buy a Ford 250. So what my client ended up doing, and I think it was more for his own personal entertainment, is he went out and just kept ratcheting up the things that he had, but he bought the things in such a way, and that's kind of the feedback in some of my programs, how to buy things with no money down. He would buy things in such a way so it looked like he was driving around the 1-ton pickup truck with all the features, and then the other guy would go out buy the next level up. But the other guy was not buying smart. He was paying cash a lot of times. And so it ended up draining the cash of the competitor, and he was actually just leasing. So the way he was updating things, he's just renting it for the time he's using it, but he was always sure to make sure the competitors saw it. And again, this is why we want to moderate our emotions, because if you see a competitor show up in a nicer truck than you're at the Association for General Contractors, they pull up in a nicer truck, and you have an emotional response to one up them, it might be something that they're doing on purpose to keep your cash flow distracted. So I hope I've given you some value here. This is a topic we could go on for 3 days. I don't like teaching in the public some of this stuff because it sounds like conspiracy, but you can map this out. Again, if you can get the citizen to not love their country or the employee not to love their company, if you accelerate their vices primarily in a way that compromises them or is otherwise lethal. And number 3 is if you have economic destruction by, again, easy money, where they overspend or they make bad decisions with money, you can cause them to become desperate. I want you to be aware of these things. I want you to see the relationships between the micro and the macro. And then I want you to apply this in your business in the most ethical way possible. It is always better to create value than it is to reduce value. It is always better to produce than it is to destroy. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. I'll see you in the next episode.